connecting to. Great. Okay, well, welcome everyone and welcome Madeline. I just wanted to introduce Madeline today, who is kindly offering workshops to Randwick City Council residents and beyond. So thank you for joining us today, everyone, and Madeline. So as you may know, Madeline is a parent coach and she's also the parent of a team, and she has a lot of experience supporting parents to build strong relationships with their children through every age and stage. So today we're going to be talking about separation anxiety, a subject that's near and dear to my heart. You know, my kids are all adults now, but that was a tough one as a parent too, wasn't it? You really feel for the kids. So I'm going to turn that over to you. And if you have any questions, what you can do is type them into the chat box. And how much time would you like to leave for the end, the questions?
What I suggest is we get through my presentation and then we'll take as many questions as we can up to the 90-minute mark.
Great. Okay. And yeah, feel free to type the questions at any time and I'll be reading them out towards the end after the presentation. Yeah?
Yep.
Or you, okay, fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over to you and I will turn my camera and microphone off. Thank you so much, Madeline.
My pleasure. So I'm Madeline Winter, and as Carolyn has said, just before we begin, you're on silent, as usually happens with a webinar. And Carolyn is my able assistant, and we would love to answer your questions. I have a link in the webinar and in an email I will send out afterwards, which will allow you to book a short free consultation with me if you've got questions. But we're really happy to tackle some of your questions today. So I think it's the Q&A function. If not that, then the chat function. But the Q&A function will be where you can ask your questions. And as Carolyn said, she'll read them out and I'll do my best to answer them. So I just would like to acknowledge country and show my respect to the traditional custodians of the land. They're the Wongal Aboriginal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to respect their elders past and present and acknowledge that Indigenous culture survives and thrives and that we've all gained from what they've lost and we have yet much to learn from them. And my best welcome via Google Translate, hoping that this covers off welcome adequately. Let me know if not. I have a disadvantage, which is that I was raised with only English and don't have the talent of other languages, but I do like to welcome you here. And to talk a bit at the beginning about the truth about you, which is that you are a good parent. You're a good parent. And that you've always done the very best that you can. And that it's not easy. And as a parent, you face real struggles and difficulties, and you're not to blame for these. And that someday you'll get a little rest. So the situation for parents is really tough. We're not given a lot of training. Many of us these days don't live in extended families. Some of us don't have much experience of children before we have our own. I remember being in the prenatal class and realizing that I must in my life have held a baby, but I didn't recall having held a baby before I had the doll in my arms for the, learning how to hold your baby and breastfeed your baby. So, we're not given good training and we're not given good support. And this is one of the world's most complex jobs. So if you hear new things today, I hope you will. But we are really hard on ourselves as parents. And I don't want anything new that comes in to be something that you end up feeling bad with yourself about because you hadn't already figured it out. You're doing the best you can. What you have to do now is what's in front of you. And there's plenty of ways this approach can help you get that right and repair anything that hasn't been quite right in the past. And here is a photo of my dear husband getting a little rest. One of his favorite things to do at our friend's house, where they have a very comfortable couch. So as I said, after the webinar, I'll send out some recording and links to resources. I would love to chat with you. You're welcome to book a free 20-minute consultation. And if somehow or other you don't get an email from either me or Carolyn with a bit more information in it, then find me on www.madelinewinter.com with 3 E's in the Madeline, and you'll find your way there. So I love this little introduction. I think sometimes we're looking for the way to parent perfectly, and more as I work with parents, it's clear to me that it's about it being rough enough. We need to focus on building connection with our kids because it will help provide an insurance policy against the places where inevitably we struggle because of our own stories, because of the situation of parenting, because of the state of the world at the moment. So we all make mistakes with the best of intentions. This little duck is taking her little flock for a walk, and they meet a hazard that she hadn't planned for, and then things go pear-shaped. So my goal here is to help you avoid, where possible, but in particular to recover from what you might call parenting fails, because it happens to us all. So today I'm here to talk about separations. I'd like to talk a little bit about why they're hard and about how you can help. I love working with parents around separation because it's a completely predictable challenge. And all that needs to happen for feelings about being away from you to come up for your child is that they get their head around the fact that they are going to need to separate from you. So in terms of planning for times when we can give our children a hand, it's not going to be difficult to figure out the times when we're going to need to do that. And today I really want to talk about a whole series of steps to do with taking on managing separations in a way that's not quite as stressful as getting to the point where you have to leave and having a screeching child. I can't guarantee you won't have a screeching child, but I think there's some work you can do beforehand and around and in preparation for separations that make that all a little easier. So I want to talk today about how you can help manage that process by preparing, which is about really building safety in your relationship with your child through play and listening and getting some support for yourself. And then the second part of it is about bringing on the feelings around separating, which is at core, it's an exercise in setting limits. And the thing I'll talk about today is the long goodbye. Just a little word about limits. The longer I've been working with this approach and with parents, the clearer it is to me that pretty well limit setting is what it's all about. But that's not a mean, harsh, distancing process of disciplining your child. Limit setting is about course correction and finding a connected way to get to feelings that are driving children off track. But almost by definition, when you have encountered a difficulty with your child where you want it to go one way and they want it to go another, and separating is one of those places where they want to stay with you and you have to go, that's a limit setting exercise. And I've lost my train of thought there, but basically it's helpful to understand most parenting challenges are actually limit setting challenges. As I said, it's a different idea of limit setting than much of what happened to us when we were young, but that's what it is. And it's a very useful framework for understanding what's going on. A little bit about me. So here's my husband and my daughter, both somewhat younger. My daughter's now 18. She's just finished school. So that's a whole other transition. I've done all sorts of different things, but the best thing I ever did was become a parent rather later than I recommend. And I've been working with Hand in Hand for over 30 years, first as a coach, really, before I had my own children. And then it all made a whole lot of sense when my daughter was born and I didn't have to teach her any of this. And this framework, I haven't needed much more than this framework of Hand in Hand to understand, make sense of, and respond to whatever was going on. And once I became a parent, you just end up connecting with other parents and sharing what you know. And at some point it made sense to be doing this a bit more systematically. So now I'm a parent coach. And you can learn more. You can visit me at my website with 3 E's in Madeline. I highly recommend the short online courses that Hand in Hand Parenting offer. And there's one called Say Goodbye to Separation Anxiety. Working your way through that, I think ideally with 1 or 2 sessions with me so that we can get really clear about what the particular challenges are in your family. But working your way through that course will give you a very clear picture of what I call the project. Separation is a project. All children have feelings about it. There's nothing wrong with you or your child that this might be difficult at the moment. I have a web page that's specifically dedicated to the topic of separation anxiety. So you'll find some useful information and resources there. And again, you're really welcome to organise to meet me and book a short consultation. I can help you figure out what the next step is there. So Hand in Hand Parenting grew up in the US, has spread all over the world, and it's a relationship, what they call a relationship-based, trauma-informed approach to parenting. We work with 2 things which we balance. One is focusing on connection building through child-directed play, which builds your relationship with your child and gives them a really strong sense that you're on their side. And then that's balanced with correction or limit setting. And what limit setting does is give your child a chance to be upset. So some feeling or emotional tension will be driving them towards behavior that's unworkable, and you need to correct that. But it's not so much about getting them to think better about the situation. Kids are incredibly smart, but what gets in their way, and frankly what gets in our way, is that there's big feelings that are getting hooked onto this moment. So when your child has to separate from you, I think separation is slightly different because basically everyone needs to separate and everyone has feelings about it. It's a natural developmental process. But if a child's had some difficulty earlier in their life that they haven't had a chance to recover from, what will happen is that the separation will be loaded up with a whole lot of big feelings, which are actually about something else. So working through those feelings in the context of separating will actually give your child a hand in all sorts of ways and free up their intelligence to take on life with zest. So you're doing them a favor in tackling the big feelings that come up around separation. And then at the foundation of what I call the love triangle, which is connecting, correcting, and limit setting, at the foundation of it is support. You need support in order to do this job well. You need somewhere where you can get perspective on what's happening, where you can offload your frustrations, where you can gain some understanding as to why it's difficult and what the challenge is, and make some plans for what to do. And all of these things, connecting, correcting, and getting the support that you need, those things build emotional safety into your relationship with your child. And that's true gold. That's what we're after. We're after a relationship with our children where we can handle the difficulties. We have a framework for understanding the difficulties, and our children will show us and tell us when there's something up for them. Little ones will tend to tell us through their play. Actually, is an incredibly efficient way to find out what's going on with your child. They won't tend to rock up to you and say, "Mummy, my friend was mean to me today." They'll come home and play out mean dollies with each other or something like that. As your children are older, the foundation that you build now will mean that they feel safe to come and tell you stuff without a sense that they're going to be overwhelmed by your feelings about it, but that what they're going to be met with is someone who can see them, who can think about the challenge, and you can problem solve together. So around separation, what is all the fuss about? Fundamentally, human beings are designed to connect with each other. One of the worst things that can happen to us is isolation. I like to tell these couple of stories. At one point, I was reading some piece of research which was about the movement patterns of twins in utero. And it turns out that the movement patterns that they use in relation to each other in the womb are different from the movement patterns they use when they're interacting, I suppose, with the world that they're living in, i.e., the lining of their mother's womb, which is their house at that point. So they're communicating and connecting with each other in a way that's profound and different from how they're connecting with, something that's not another person in the room, sort of. And then I really I'm sure we all noticed how important connection was during the period of the last few years that we've been through. But I had to go to my local GP, and I tried to organise a telephone consult because those had just been introduced. They didn't want to do that because the GP that I was trying to do that with, the one that was available, didn't know me. They wanted me to go up there. So I went up there, and I couldn't believe how much better I felt after I had spent 10 minutes with this young doctor who I will probably never see again. And it was partly because we had spent so much time not really being around other people. So we really need to be with other people. It's how our brains are wired. And a sense of connection within your family is what greases the wheels of family life. So if things if things are difficult, it means that at least what's going on is that there's not enough sense of connection in your relationship with whoever it is that you're having difficulty with, in this case, between you and your child. Just because you spent the day with them, which is the challenge of having really little kids, doesn't actually mean that you manage to connect in the way that they need. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So as I've said, separation is, I think it's the big emotional project for any young child. It's inevitable. It's really important. It's repeated and it comes in layers. So what you'll find is you can work through a difficulty around separation and things become easier. And then what happens, I think, is that your child stretches out a bit developmentally and they're pushing against things they don't really know, and it's pulling up some bunch of feelings, and you find that you're back again having a difficult time leaving them somewhere. That's not it's not a regression, it's actually a movement forward, I think. It You just need to it's not a fail at all. You just need to do a bit more work around their feelings of separation. The other thing is that all children feel it. Some children are better at squashing it down than others. And I tell a little story about, I have run play events where I train parents to play with their children using a couple of our listening tools, play listening and special time, which I'll talk about a bit later. And so we set up this time where we have this big play where the adults are completely sort of dedicated to playing the way the children want to play. And then at some point, the parents will go off and do what we call a listening partnership, which is they swap some listening time away from the children. And often this provides a chance for a child to because they've been really connected through the play, they'll really feel the prospect of their parent leaving. And I remember this parent being adamant that their boy just had a completely easy time with separations. But when we'd done this sort of extended play, extended connecting time, when she announced that she was going to go, he burst into tears. And I had the deep privilege of listening to him be sad about his mum being away while she went off and got some support for herself for 10 minutes. And then she came back and they played again. His sadness is about relieving himself of feelings which have been hanging around for a while. It's actually not at all damaging for children to be away from us for shortish periods of time. I need to dig up this piece of research, but I read something somewhere that they did some studies of young ones' cortisol levels, which are a measure of stress, and children whose parents went away and came back had a lower stress level than children whose parents had not gone away at all. So to have your parent go away, to get to feel sad about it and have your parent come back is deeply reassuring and positive for young people, for all of us. So the way I like to think about the whole project is that you have a relationship bank balance with your children. And the credit in that bank balance is connection. And at times where you're finding that everything's a struggle and you just seem to be having to set limits left, right, and center, that generally is an indication that, one, there's some big feelings around, and two, your child doesn't feel well enough connected. And sometimes you can get through those tough spots just by doing some very efficient connection building, which we have a listening tool called Special Time, which I'll talk about a bit later, which is very, very, very good for doing that. At other times, things are easy and there seems to be a deep sense of closeness and cooperation. What that means is that there's plenty of credit in the bank. And in fact, the way that it works, if you've come to one of my talks about setting limits, the way that it works is that the connection credits that you build, that you put deposits of connection into your relationship bank balance. And the way that it works is that when you have to set a limit, that is a productive process if there's plenty of connection credit in the bank, because limits use up connection credit. So there's nothing wrong with limits. They're really important. We teach a kind of play which is child-led, which is called special time. But this is not about just letting your kid do whatever they want to do all the time. That won't work. You need to set limits, but in order for that to go well, you need to make sure there's plenty of connection in your relationship bank balance. The other important thing to understand is a bit about how children's emotions work. So basically, we all encounter stressful experiences, and as adults, we're probably not often in anything like the kind of stressful experience that children are in often, in that we will have encountered, if we're going into a new environment, we will have encountered similar environments, and we will be able to use the information we know from the past to help us navigate what's in front of us. Young ones are regularly being presented with a situation they may never have had any experience of before, and they don't have a reserve of experience to understand that they'll get through this. So those experiences can be quite stressful. As well, all of us encounter some sort of difficulty. Some of us have encountered much bigger difficulties than others in the challenge of growing up, whether it's dislocation, whether it's we've lived through, big events, floods, wars, separation, our parents' relationship dissolving, someone dying, some illness. Everybody has experiences that create emotional tension. And that emotional tension tends to drive off-track behavior. So we don't talk about wrong or right behavior, because what is workable in your family, in your situation, will be different from what's workable in mine. But there'll be pretty clear places where what your child is doing is unworkable, and we would call that off track. Your child is actually looking for you to set a limit around that behavior, even if it doesn't look like that, because they actually want to offload these big feelings that have filled up their backpack. So over time, these stressful experiences come in on top of one another, and a child's emotional backpack gets heavier and heavier. And the way children deal with that is that they'll often get stuck on little issues. So they'll have big upsets about seemingly silly little issues. I'm sure every parent has those moments where, there's a huge upset because the tissue has got a tear in it, or a big upset because we've lost our cuddly blanket, or, the biscuit is broken. So children will use little incidents, little issues to have big feelings. We talk about pretexts. They're finding something to hang their feelings off. And when we tell them to stop crying, cheer up, have a glass of water, settle down, actually stopping the release of those feelings, stopping our children or anybody showing those feelings, doesn't actually make them go away. They just go underground, and they'll be pushing to pop up around some other issue. And sometimes big difficulties around separating from us are actually a bunch of feelings about something else altogether, using the separation to as an opportunity to get felt. When children feel safe, they'll actually start to release the tension, release the emotional tension. So tears release stress and grief. Tantrums are actually a very efficient way of releasing frustration if we know how to hang in there with someone who's having a tantrum. Laughter is actually an incredibly important way of releasing lighter fears. That's why children laugh when they're in trouble. They're actually a little bit scared. It's not that they're not taking it seriously. And when a child really gets worked up into an upset, the sweating, the struggle, the shaking, the screaming, that's actually a healing process, which may not be that easy for us to hang in with our children around, but it does help to understand that it's part of an important healing process. And the challenge is to actually provide, to build the safety that will allow a child to offload those upsets, because those upsets are what's getting in their way of being able to remember that you will come back. A child who's desperately unhappy about you leaving, you know, is having trouble remembering that you have always come back. So we want to really create an environment of time in for children. So when a child is feeling a big, heavy emotional backpack, they tend to feel disconnected from you, and they will signal for help, which is what unworkable or off-track behavior is. We feel very, very pulled to fix the problem. Here, sweetheart, try a different color pair of trousers if the trousers were the wrong color, or giving them a biscuit that isn't broken, or a sippy cup that's pink, not green. And some things we do need to fix, but sometimes the problem is actually not the color of the sippy cup, or, you know, how prickly the sweater is. It's actually an emotional project that's got hooked on something, on some activity or point of transition in the day. And the best thing we can do is actually bring a limit at that point to interrupt the off-track behavior and connect with our children. Sweetheart, we're just going to wear the brown trousers today. I know. And what happens is, if a child's carrying emotional tension, when we bring that limit, the feelings come up to the surface. And if we understand that that's an important part of the process, and we're able to just stop and listen without getting angry or agitated or trying to stop the feelings, the expression of feelings, if we can listen to them, if we can listen through enough, often what happens is a child is able to do what needs to happen. They're able to think, or they're able to figure out some kind of, it may not be exactly what you want them to do, but it's a workable solution that you can figure out together. So around separation, what's the project? Well, in my color coordinated way here, it's got 5 steps. We need to plan for separation. We need to build a sense of connection. We need to be ready to listen to our children's sadness about us going away, understanding that it's a bucket that needs to get drained. And when it's drained enough, a child will be able to manage feelings that are about us being away and get on with having a great time at preschool, for instance. So we need to plan and not be sideswiped by big feelings around separation, connect, listen to upsets, and then leave. Leaving is fine. Sometimes I'm a big fan, for instance, at school or preschool, drop and leave. Don't hang around. I can talk more about why, but basically those environments aren't going to be places where it's easy to listen to your child's upset. And they have got a better chance, your child's got a better chance of pulling their attention away from their upset and getting on with whatever's good happening, if you get out of the way. And then you can listen to upsets about separation at another time. As I said, it's an easy thing to set up. You just have to make it clear that you might be going to leave. And if a child's got a backpack full of feelings about separating, they'll begin to feel them. So you can do it, more or less at your convenience if that's the project. And then when you come back, you need to reconnect so that a child is able to re-establish that sense of emotional safety. So what does planning look like? So big in the out there in the wide world, there's ideas about time in and time out. And I have a slightly different understanding of what those are. Parents need time out. Children don't. Parents need time out to download how you're feeling, to get the support that you need to think through the challenge and make a plan for it, to get help. And children need time in when things are going wrong. They need to replenish and build up their sense of connection. They need a chance to download their feelings, which is a kind of time in. When we listen to our children without taking offense, without taking it personally, without trying to argue about it or teach them some lesson while they're in the middle of their upset, that's time in. And in general, with enough connection and cleaning out of feelings, thinking follows. So in terms of you getting the support that you need, sometimes separation challenges are as much about how we feel about separating from our child as it is about how our child feels about it. I'm very acutely aware of that at the moment, being at a really different stage, but there's a big process of separation now as my daughter's finished school. And I can tell I have a whole lot of feelings about it. So it's useful to understand that how you feel is an important component of how it goes. And it's useful to spend some time talking with someone about what there might be from your own childhood about separations, or about how people responded when you were upset. Those things, I like to say, we breathe it in as young ones, and then as parents we breathe it out. So if people were mean and harsh to us or the other people around us when we were little, we breathe that in, and then even despite best intentions, we tend to just breathe it out at our children. So we'll be pulled to get mean and harsh with them if someone was mean and harsh with us. Talking about what our own story is helps to resolve or disconnect that link between what happened to us and how we want to be with our kids. You also I find that, many parents can do with a chance to actually think about the separation process, about when the feelings come up, how they can plan for that to happen at a time when they've got time to listen. And how to make that time. And a really fantastic way to get that support is what we call a listening partnership. So I couldn't get by in life, I don't think, but particularly my parenting has been greatly assisted by having a set of relationships where what we do is listen to one another. You need to create a really strict sense of confidentiality so that you feel safe to talk about stuff without knowing it's going to get spread around everywhere. But this is a place where you can talk about how things really are without being afraid that you're going to get someone else's opinion about it coming at you, or you'll be offered advice that you weren't looking for. Generally, in the wide world, if we express doubt or uncertainty or feelings about something that our children are doing, we'll end up getting a whole lot of advice. And generally, we need to figure out for ourselves what's going to work in our family. So a listening partnership is a space where you can do that. You find a partner, you take turns listening. Generally, you take equal time. I recommend using a timer. It might take 10 minutes each. And when the timer goes off, you basically stop being the person who's being listened to, and you swap over and listen to your partner. And the idea is to listen with warmth and your full attention, and not to interrupt and give advice. And as I said, it's really important to keep it confidential. So you don't go and talk about it with anyone else, and you don't raise it in conversation later. It's kind of protected zone. That is a very good way of parenting well, is having that chance. So you've planned, you've figured out when separation feelings come up, you've thought about whether there's a way you can set that up so that you can tackle it when you've actually got time. Because one of the tricks around separation is that it often happens when you really need to get away. And that's one of the dangers. In planning, what you'll want to do is identify some times where you actually don't have pressure to leave, where you can bring your child's attention to the fact that you're going to leave, but you've got time to listen to them. That all goes particularly well if your child starts off with a really deep sense of connection. So this little segment's about connecting with your child. We teach a tool called Special Time, which allows a child to carry the gift of your love with them when you're away. It's a one-on-one playtime. What you do is basically set the time and tell your child, I'll do whatever you want to do. There are some complexities with that, and I encourage you, once you get a bit down the track with Special Time, you start to have some things that you think, oh, I don't quite know how to manage this. Make an appointment with me and we can chat about it, and it'll straighten it out pretty quickly. But in general, this is a space where you do what your child wants, you play the way your child wants, and they will tell you stuff in the things they choose to do in Special Time. So they'll explore their ideas about things, they'll show you where they're worried about things, they'll play out experiences that have caused them some kind of stress. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and it's a chance for you to really delight in your child. I was a bit shocked, you know, imagine when I became a parent that I would have all this time to kind of look into my daughter's eyes and love her. And I mean, I did do that, but I got to do a whole lot less of that than I thought. It was actually, I spent a lot of time just keeping everything going. And Special Time meant there was this time where I could really decide to put everything else aside and just delight in her. So Special Time is where it's between, it's only ever one child. If there's more than one child there, it's not Special Time. So those of you with more than one child, it's going to take planning to find a time where you can be with just one of your children. Each of your children really needs this kind of direct line in for you. We recommend turning on a timer so everyone knows how long it's going to go. As I said, you announce whatever you want to do. You offer them as much extra warmth and eye contact and enthusiasm as you can manage. If you can get some laughter going without teasing or humiliating or tickling, that's a useful thing. It's how your children are offloading lighter fears, and little ones have a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things that are a little bit scary for young ones just because they're encountering so many new things in their life. This is a time where you don't offer any advice or instruction, and Special Time isn't conditional. This is really important. Special Time isn't something that you do in order, you know, we'll do Special Time if you'll eat your dinner. We'll do Special Time if you clean your teeth. Actually, Special Time before you clean your teeth is likely to have teeth cleaning go better, because if there's something about teeth cleaning that's causing your child to bump into some feelings, the extra connection that Special Time offers may be able to just bump them over that feeling into the thing that needs to be done, or make it safe for them to have an upset, which will be about something else. So a parent was telling me a story about tooth cleaning, and in the end, she decided, I mean, we don't really know what our children, what experience from earlier in their life caused our child stress. But it's very common for newborn babies to be, I think the word's intubated, but for their airways and their mouth and air passages to be cleaned out with a suction thing. Well, if that's the first thing you encounter when you've come out into the world from the warmth and security of your mother's womb, you might get a little bit scared. And we figured that the teeth cleaning thing might be about that. You can assume wherever you come across a difficulty in your routine with your child or your relationship with your child, it's about something. We don't really need to worry about what it's about. We just need to find a way to connect around it and to let our children have some feelings about it. I don't know how I got onto that, but anyway, so we've planned, we've figured out how to connect and top up a child's sense of connection. And then we need to basically set a limit and listen. So we call this stay listening when we're listening to children. And around separation, we call it the long goodbye. So at a time when you have time, you will propose to leave, but you don't actually need to leave. You want to bring your child's attention to the feelings they have about you being away at a time where you actually don't have to rush off, so you can listen to them. So you propose to leave, you say something like, sweetheart, I'm going to leave now. I care about you. I'll always come back to you. In general, the fewer words we use, the better. We tend to start trying to reason with our children around setting limits. And usually, in fact, our children's thinking brain is offline. By the time we need to set a limit, they're full of feelings, they're not full of thinking. We come at them with a whole lot of words, and it's like it's landing in outer space. It's best to stick to 5 words or less, because that stops you from ending up trying to argue with your child. And this is not a time to try and give them information. It's simply a time to state a fact that works as a kind of limit. And if they've got some feelings hanging around, they'll use that opportunity to have some feelings about it. So you don't need to fix whatever it is in order that they stop having feelings. The point is that you really are bringing their attention to the feelings, and you listen for as long as you can. And generally, in a long goodbye, how this goes is you start by proposing. And then you might say, the way it used to go with between me and my husband was, the next step would be, she would be a bit upset about it, and then the next step would be, I'm gonna leave you with your daddy, sweetheart, and just a little move towards moving her onto daddy's lap. And that would bring her attention to the fact that I was going to leave at some point, and she would start to have feelings. She'd start to cry again. And then when that sort of backs off, I would actually move her onto her dad's lap. Anyway, at some point, I remember the thing that would have her know I was going to leave, and this is pre-verbal, this is before she was 2, so kids are really smart, was when I would go to get my keys out of my bag. That was when she really could tell I was going to leave. So you kind of inch up to leaving. What you're doing is, with separation, it's like when a child is right on top of you, they can't feel it. So you want to just gradually increase the space between you, or the sort of strength of your proposal to leave. So getting the keys was a stronger indication that I was going to leave than just announcing it. And at each little point, your child will be able to feel another little layer of sadness about you going. Yeah, and listen for as long as you can. I haven't got a slide for this, but a really important idea is that you really don't need to be consistent. What you're doing, you're not teaching your child how to be without you. You're draining the bucket of feelings about being away from you. And once they don't have a whole lot of feelings about being away from you, they'll be able to enjoy whatever it is that's happening while you're not there, and then be really pleased when you get back. So it doesn't matter if you say you're going to go and you listen for a while and then you've had enough. Most adults have a really pretty clear limit as to how long we can listen to a kid be upset, mostly because we didn't get listened to very much as young ones. Then you can sort of decide that actually you're going to stay. You don't need to be consistent. It's not about teaching lessons. We call this stay listening. So when a child starts to get upset, we don't need to stop them getting upset. the upset, the tears, the expression of sadness, that is not the sadness, that's not the hurt. It's a way of recovering from the hurt of the grief of loss. So we can listen to that expression of feeling without being afraid that it's hurting our child. We often culturally think if we stop the crying, we stop the hurt. Actually, if we stop the crying, we stop the healing process. So basically, it's a kind of time in for children. So there's special time, which is a very dedicated time in. And then there's this listening called stay listening. You want to move close. You want to make it safe. So if a child's wanting to throw things, you're probably going to need to just gently put your hand on over their hand and not let that happen. You want to plan for the times when you know your child's going to have some feelings. So you've got time to listen to them. You propose, I'm going to leave, sweetheart. You're safe with, say you're leaving them with, you're safe at preschool. I'll always come back to you. I think that you really don't need to do much reassuring, but I will always come back to you is never going to be a wrong thing to say. And remembering that the crying and the tantruming and the sweating and the loud words and the struggle, they are the healing process. You can confidently hang in there with your kid around those. And if you manage to do it well, what you'll have out the other side is a child who in this context for a while will have an relatively easy time about leaving you. So then you can leave. Leaving your child isn't a big deal, and you'll get plenty of opportunities to listen to them. So if you're leaving your child at preschool or at school, for instance, and they're heading for a big upset, really, it's fine to just go. Often you'll ring up, preschool will tell you, I'll ring up and see how she is. And usually the child is kind of quite happy. That doesn't mean the child's got rid of the sad feelings. It just means they've been able to push them down enough to get on with other things. When they're at school, they need to get on with other things. Unfortunately, schools are not set up to be places where schools can help people, families work through feelings around separation. They do their best, but they're really not the place where that needs to happen. And if you're hanging around for a long time, your child's attention is on the prospect that you're going to leave. So their feelings about you leaving are right up high. Sometimes you just need to leave and know that your child will give you an opportunity to listen to them about how sad they are, about something being left, or some separation. They'll give you another opportunity later. And then you want to reconnect. So when you come back after a separation, special time's a really smart thing to plan to do. Just in terms of getting an opportunity to listen later, a parent was telling me a story about the child's grandparent had given the child a purple bear and a teddy bear, and to mind while she was moving house. The grandma was moving house. And one day this child came in and out of the blue with the purple bear in their hand and said, "Mummy, my grandma's going to want purple bear back." And I'd worked with this parent for a while, and she said, I had this moment where I was tempted to say, "Grandma, it's okay, sweetheart. Grandma won't want purple bear back." And the truth was, there's no way if the child had really wanted to keep purple bear that grandma would have wanted purple bear back. But the parent said, I actually checked myself because I thought, she knows grandma isn't. It's somewhere in her universe, she knows grandma isn't going to want purple bear back. I think she's looking for a way to be sad about having to be separated from something, and she's using Purple Bear as a pretext. So the mum said, and I think they were just starting school or something, or they were going to move house or something. There was some thing in the background that made the mum think maybe she's having a bit of sadness about that. So the mum said, sweetheart, oh yeah, Grandma might want Purple Bear back. And the little girl started to have a big upset. I don't want to be away from Purple Bear. It's not fair. I'm really going to miss Purple Bear. You know, so it was a pretext about something that where really it was pretty likely, and the mum was pretty clear that the child probably knew that Grandma wouldn't want Purple Bear back, but she was using the prospect of Purple Bear having to go back as a way to be sad about some big separation that was happening. So leave, listen later, and reconnect when you come back. Special time. And as I said, enjoy the special gift of little heartbreaks. All those little heartbreaks about things that have to stop. You see children having heartbreaks all over the place. My daughter gets frustrated with me. So my heart goes out to this poor child who's so sad about something having to stop. I was in the shop the other day, and a child walked in front of me with her mum, and there were toys like they put in these awful places. How to be mean to a parent: put a toy at child height inside the door. She picks up this truck and starts to walk around with it, and then mum had to put the truck back on the shelf, and the child starts to have a really big upset. It's like, oh my God, poor little one. Anyway, children will find lots of opportunities to have little heartbreaks, and those are a gift where you've got time to listen. You can trust that they're about this big developmental process of having to say goodbye to things that you would like to keep hold of, stay close to things that you don't really want to be away from. And when you're not carrying around a backpack full of feelings about that, children can manage that well, and they will give you special gifts of little heartbreaks. You don't need to get frustrated because it seems like a ridiculous thing to be so upset about. Sometimes I think the more ridiculous, the more silly the thing is that your child's upset about, perhaps the bigger the upset they're working on from some time in their past. So you can kind of be relaxed about it. Oh, sweetheart, we need to put this truck back on the shelf. Oh. Sometimes the shop isn't the best place to have a big upset. But anyway, I was there the other day and my heart went out to this little one. So that's what I have to say today about separations. I do love to be in touch with you. I will see if there's some questions, but we will send a recording out. It just needs to get uploaded, and you can watch it again, or if you happen to have missed this, you can watch it. And do feel free to get in touch with me. I'm really happy to talk with you about what's going on in your family and how these tools how you can plan and set this up and give you a bit of support through the process of listening to your child's upsets about being away from you.
Thank you, Madeline. Look, I don't have any questions in the chat, but if anyone wants to type anything in, I've opened the chat and put a little box there. I don't know if you want to, I don't know if you're able to copy and paste your website link into the chat too.
Oh, yeah.
Because that might be good too, or just take a photo of it, guys. But if you copy it into the link, and then what I can do is send out the resources to everyone, and it usually takes about a week or so, pardon me, for it to get onto the YouTube. So maybe I'll wait to get into the YouTube, and then I'll send that out with the email. So yeah, fantastic. Oh, let me just see if there's anything there. Yeah, there's Madeline's website in the chat.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I was trying to, how do I get this link to people? There you go. It's there if you want it.
Yeah, so we'll just wait another couple of minutes. We can't take any, because it's a webinar, we can only take the written questions, but usually we do get a lot of questions, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. So I thought that was fabulous, particularly the impact on the parent. And, you know, if the parents possibly managing their own feelings of separation anxiety too at the same time that they're having to be present to their child. I thought that was really interesting.
Yes, there's two sides to it. You know, sometimes it's about us. It's about how hard it is for us to be away from our children, or how it can be. Sometimes it's heartbreaking how sad our children can be, you know, and it's like, oh, we desperately want to try and fix it.
Yes.
But you know, and sometimes I think that's a biological imperative, really, that we need to be set up to fix problems for our children, or you know, our species wouldn't have survived. But it gets a bit rigid, and sometimes we just need to listen. But I think I'm firmly convinced that our children will have a much easier time with this than we do, because we've listened to them, and what they breathed in was an adult who was a bit more relaxed about upsets than certainly my parents were.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's really good. So it's about trusting that our kids are okay, and we've like you said, we're good parents, we've done the best we could, and we're well-intentioned, especially if we're showing up for these webinars, and they will be fine, you know, and I guess it's for us to manage that and trust ourselves.
Yes,
to trust them.
that's right.
Yeah.
I have someone sent me a question. So shall I answer a question that someone
someone sent you directly? Yeah.
Well, someone who was interested in coming had sent me a question.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So what they've said is, my daughter with separation anxiety has a twin brother. He doesn't get anxious about the separation, and he would support her, but she doesn't find it a comfort. And what I'd say about that is, I think it has to be, we have to trust that our children are deeply connected to their siblings, and that is a sense of comfort and reassurance. But good on the little girl for holding out. She's got a big lot of feelings that she doesn't want to be talked out of. And often children will often try to comfort each other in the way that comfort is an interesting idea. I think that's what I want to say. Comfort is an interesting idea. It's often about squashing down feelings.
Yes.
So probably what the little boy's trying to do is cheer her up. Yes. And she's sticking to her guns and knows that what she needs to do is offload some feelings. And it's often quite difficult for children to listen to each other, partly because the way it works psychologically is which is why it's hard for us, when someone else is upset, it reminds us of our own upset. So it's not that easy for a child to listen to another child be sad, because they notice that they're sad themselves. So what that little girl needs is a time with you, the adult, listening to her talk about how sad she is about you going. That she's, you know, good on her. She's sticking to her guns. I don't want to be talked out of this. I don't want to be comforted by my brother. I want to really miss you. So anyway,
I can relate. That's
right.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, it's just so insightful, and your approach is very compassionate on the child, and like you said, not covering up the feelings of the child, but also not covering up our own feelings around it. So it's really an innovative approach that I've never heard before. So I think it's wonderful.
Good. I have one other question, and then if we haven't got anything else, we can stop. It says, this person has said, One of my 3-year-old twins still cries going into creche each morning, having attended for the past 15 months.
Oh gosh.
He has a nervous disposition in character, and I'm unsure how to help him. What I'd say is setting up. So that's a perfect example of how being familiar with where you're going to isn't necessarily enough to push the feelings away. So this child, for some reason, has a really heavy backpack, and he's not able to take that off when he gets to creche and enjoy what's there, although I'm sure that what's there is a good thing. So you really do want to, when it's been going on that long, I really recommend coming and having a chat with me, because when something's been going on that long, part of what will be happening is that you are really sick of it yourself, and you need some space to sort of download that and think past that, because that will be getting in the way. But my guess is that around a child we call it an emotional project, when a child is persisting in the same sort of challenge, emotional challenge or difficulty, it takes a plan. It takes really working on building a sense of connection, and then really deliberately with a little one like that, really deliberately setting up opportunities where he's going to start to fret about being separated from you, and you've got time to listen. And what you may find if you work through a project like that is that his general nervous disposition shifts. Sometimes that we work with what pops out. So some kids are just going to be warriors, but some of those things that we think might be our child's character are sometimes to do with some big emotional baggage they're carrying around. And setting up a project around separation will help them offload a whole bunch of things, not just the feelings about this specific separation. And the other thing I'd say about that is get help around this, because once your child's going to school, if he's still at creche, there's some greater room in a good creche or childcare centre. The workers there tend to understand that separation's the emotional project, and they're a bit more tolerant of it. Schools don't have much space. By the time you get to school, the ratio of an adult to child is such that the teachers really get pretty anxious if it looks like some kid's going to get really upset, because they're worried that the whole class will end up in tears. There just isn't the slack. So you want to give your child a hand with this big bundle of feelings that he's obviously showing you that he's got before you hit school, because it's going to make the transition to school much harder. And schools don't find it easy and are often not that relaxed around children who've got big separation issues. So you'd be doing him and yourself a favor to get a project going around letting him have some sadness about whatever it is. It's showing up around separating from you. My guess is if he's got a nervous disposition and this has been going on this long, it's a big chunk of something that needs work.
So when you say the longer term project, say someone was to work with you, would that be, like you said in the beginning, managing his feelings, like talking about separation when you have plenty of time?
Yes. I like to be careful about the idea of talking about, like we can kind of get into, I'm sure good children's story, often the first port of call is a good children's story about separating, where it was all right in the end. And the trouble with those stories is there is, I think, sometimes they're a developmentally appropriate way of communicating information. But mostly our children don't need information. What they need is support to get through the feelings.
Yeah.
So telling your child that you're going to leave and hoping that that you'll come back to them, hoping that will reassure them out of the feelings doesn't work. But telling your child that you're going to leave and waiting to see if they start to feel a bit sad about that, and hold what we call holding the limit. I know, sweetheart, I know, but I'm going to leave you with Dad. That's holding the limit. And so you're bringing the prospect of the separation back to their attention. You're not trying to give them information about it. You're trying to have them feel what it's like in a safe environment to be separated from you. But choosing to do that when you've got time. If particularly say that story about the person whose child's still upset after 15 months, I really recommend working through the online course around separation. When you've got something that persistent, you don't want to go in, you want to have a real plan. You want to understand why this is difficult and what the various pieces are that are going to need to be put in place in order for it to be safe for your child to feel sad about it, and in order to build your own sort of resources around listening to your child there. So it's useful to have a really clear picture of what this is about and how these different tools of building connection and setting limits work, and then tackle the project. Yeah.
Very good.
Good.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you.
My pleasure.
We don't have any other questions, so would you
Okay.
like to wrap it up now, Madeline?
Yeah, I'm glad you were here. Thank you for making the time. Time is so precious for parents, and I'd love to be in contact with you, so feel free to get in touch. And thank you to Randwick Council for making this possible.
Oh, my pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really love your input. Thank you so much, Madeline, and thank you everyone for joining, and we'll get those resources out as soon as the YouTube link is up.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great. All
Bye.
right. See you.